Caitlin Clark has been and will continue to change the game of women's basketball as we know it. Currently, Clark is playing in her 4th season with the Iowa Hawkeyes and what has arguably been her best year yet. Currently, she leads all of women's basketball in points per game as she's gone on to average 32 in the 22 games she's played so far this season. Yes, not only is she an elite level scorer, but hell, she can do it all when it comes to the basketball court. Because she also leads all of women's basketball with 7.7 assists per game. Usually, if you tune into an Iowa Hawkeyes basketball game, the ball will be in Caitlin Clark's hands. And that's not to discredit her rebounding, because she also somehow averages 7 rebounds as a guard. And it doesn't stop there, because her defensive play is also on point. As when it comes to steals, she's been averaging about 1.7 steals per game this season and about 0.5 blocks. And let me just tell you, Caitlin Clark is not somebody you want to have to game plan against, alright? Some of the best coaches in women's basketball will tell you this. Kim Mulkey, Dawn Staley, Tara Vanderveer, they all have high praise when it comes to Caitlin Clark. And they all have this fear in their eyes when they see she is on the other end of that court, okay? Right now, this season, she's averaging about 48% from the field. That means she makes about half the shots she takes. And from the three-point line, yeah, she's even deadlier, as she's gone on to average about 40% from the field this season. Heck, the only thing stopping Caitlin Clark from averaging a 50-40-90 season is probably her free throw shooting, and that should go to show you how great she is, okay? She single-handedly carried this Iowa school into relevancy, because let me tell you, 5 years ago, no one was talking about the Iowa Hawkeyes women's basketball program. Hell, they weren't even talking about the men's basketball program if we're keeping it a buck. But now that Caitlin Clark is here, she's changed the game. She's got them at 20-2 for the season, 9-1 in the Big Ten. Hell, they'll probably win the Big Ten again at this rate. I mean, I know for a fact that they were co-champs with Ohio State a few years ago during Caitlin Clark's sophomore season, but I'm sure she would love to bring another Big Ten championship back to Iowa. And it's not like she was been good for the past few years. She's been great for the past 4 years. Hell, this season, I couldn't even tell you the last time she dropped points under 20, because she hasn't. The lowest amount of points Caitlin Clark has scored in a game this season was 21 in the Gulf Coast Showcase, and she only did that because her team ended up winning by almost 40 points. So she didn't even play the 4th quarter. She only played 26 minutes that game, and in those 26 minutes, she put up 21 points, about 6 rebounds, and 6 assists. So her numbers still looked really good, even though her minutes were cut. And that was arguably her worst game statistically, I guess. But for the past 5 games, she hasn't dropped a single game under 30 points. Everything's been 30 and above for her. This team lives and dies off of Caitlin Clark's performance. I mean, if we take a look at their 2 losses this season, it becomes very obvious. Hell, their first one came very early on in the season versus a very mediocre Kansas State school. They're not a good basketball team by any means. It just so happened that Caitlin Clark was having an off night. She only shot 28% from the field, still managed to put 24 points up on the board, but if Caitlin Clark isn't producing any offense, the whole team isn't producing any offense, which is why they only managed to score 58 points that game, ended up losing 65-58. Hell, she couldn't even, throw for that many assists this night. That's how rough it was for Caitlin Clark. Because usually, when she has an off shooting night, she'll be able to rely on her passing ability, her playmaking ability to carry her out, but it didn't work. And then if you take a look at their second loss, it came a few weeks ago versus Ohio State. Now, Ohio State is a much better school, especially with their women's basketball program, and this was a very big game for Iowa, because if you take a look at the Big Ten, Ohio State and Iowa are the 2 top schools. And even though Iowa fell to one of their biggest rivals, that didn't stop Caitlin Clark from putting on an absolute show. Out of the 92 points scored from Iowa's side, 45 of those came directly from Caitlin Clark. She was more than half of the team's offense, alright? 12 for 25 from the field, 7 for 18 from the 3-point line. She only had a handful of rebounds and assists this game because all she was doing was scoring. And yet that wasn't enough, as Ohio State ended up beating this team in overtime. And even though this was Iowa's second loss of the season, that isn't why this game went viral. This game went viral because of one Ohio State fan absolutely took out Caitlin Clark. They ran into each other. There was some blame as to whether Caitlin Clark should have seen it coming. But anyway, that big incident is what caused this game to go viral. Hell, people didn't even care that Iowa had just lost their second game because they knew that they would bounce back. And they have, ever since that game. Caitlin Clark and the Hawkeyes have been playing amazing. Now, you may be curious as to why I've decided to make a video on Caitlin Clark in early February. The Super Bowl is right around the corner. The biggest game in the biggest sport in America is about to happen. The NBA trade deadline is only a few days away. The NHL All-Star Game is happening as I speak. And yet here I am talking about Caitlin Clark and women's college basketball, because that's how big she has become. And obviously, I could have waited till March Madness rolled around, and her name probably would have been at the peak, or even a month after that in April, when the WNBA draft is set to take place, and Caitlin Clark is expected to go number 1 to the Indiana Fever. And yet, I decided not to, because she's on the verge of making history in women's college basketball. She's about to set the record for most career points at the college level, passing Kelsey Plum. And Kelsey Plum is doing a phenomenal job with the Las Vegas Aces right now, another superstar in the WNBA. She currently has 2 rings, and she'll probably get way more, but in her time with Washington, she set a record, a record that wasn't meant to be touched for a long time, as she put up 3,527 points in her time in Washington. And here we are, only 6-7 years later, Caitlin Clark is about to pass that. It's set to happen around Valentine's Day. I want to say February 15th versus Michigan is when it's projected that Caitlin Clark will pass Kelsey Plum. Barring any major injuries from happening, I do believe Caitlin Clark will set this record and will go down as one of, if not the best women's player the game has ever seen. I hope that she has a fantastic career in the WNBA and that it's not with the Indiana Fever, kind of a mediocre franchise. Would love if she went to my LA Sparks, so let's hope that happens. That isn't the only place she's setting records, though. If we take a look at women's career assists, she currently sits in 8th place with the potential to get into the top 5. Women's triple doubles, she's 2nd place behind only Sabrina, and I don't think she'll ever catch Sabrina. She had 26. Caitlin Clark is at 15, so that's a record that probably won't be broken, but she ends in the top 2. Fantastic. Women's career points produced. Caitlin Clark is already number 1 in that, and it's not close. She's leading by over 100 points, and she's still got a couple months left in college basketball. And those are a few of her many records she's already breaking. Hopefully, she ends her career off with the Iowa Hawkeyes as, champions in March Madness, because I know the Hawkeyes female team has never won in the NCAA tournament before, and they got really close last year. This is Caitlin Clark's last year to do it, so hopefully she gets that done. Anyway, that's about it for the video. All I really wanted to cover was, her potential to break the all-time scoring record in women's college basketball, and all the stuff she's been doing with Iowa for the past 4 years. Catch y'all later. Much love. Deuces.